We'd like to thank our sponsors for today's class. So B is sponsoring with Jerry. Her mother's yard site is one. Friday, the Neshama Shnaben Aliyah. So we do thank you indeed. I'd like to welcome back everyone. I'd like to thank, welcome those who came from Eretz Yisrael, and especially those who had some public nachas and Yom Ha'atzmaut with their grandchildren's achievements.
Or children. Or grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
I'm thinking of how I taught him that.
Take credit.
I taught them, yeah, I was the mother.
Okay.
That's why
It's an incredible achievement indeed. Okay, Parshas Emor. Page 682. You're going to turn to page 682. Now you open your Chumash. Whenever you study Chumash, you know very well that there are many sections that seem to be repeating a teaching, a theme, a concept, or even a story more than once. And you're okay with it. You know that that's how the book works. But you know very well that there's a reason why things are presented in specific locations. The Chagim are mentioned in several places throughout the Chumash. The general rule is that if you want to know about the core of the Chagim, you'll turn to this week's Parashat Emor. Now, as they are preparing for their entry into the land of Israel, and they are presented with the details for what will be their celebrations in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, they need to know all the details. So those details are given right before their entry, and that is in Parashat Bamidbar, in Chumash Bamidbar, in Parashat Pinchas, where they are told, listen, you're going to come to the land of Israel, and you're going to bring these sacrifices, and there are details there because they come with these libations. And now that you are entering, and you're going to eventually have a permanent structure, you need to know all the details of how a holiday, how a Chag is celebrated in a Bet HaMikdash. So Parashat Pinchas, what we read later on, which is going to occur in late in Tammuz, that relates to the temple. What we are going to be reading about this week in Parashat Emor is really the core of the holiday. And the core of a holiday, a Jewish holiday, can be celebrated and must be celebrated even if we unfortunately do not have that spiritual hub of the temple. Even if we don't have it, there is a Chag. And the Levites, Kohanim, have a responsibility of teaching us the guidelines of what we could do on a Chag, what not. How do we cook on a Chag? What kind of oven can we use on the Chag? Can we lower the temperature or not? These are details and information about the Chagim, and we also want to know the idea, the message, what we are supposed to be thinking during a Chag. It's a time for spiritual growth. What should we be focusing on? That appears in Parashat Emor. So in Parashat Emor, what we are going to be reading here, you should not expect anything that relates to the Bet HaMikdash. Right? No sacrifices here. Don't start telling me that on Sukkot, on day 1, there are 13 bulls, and on day 2, there are 12 bulls. Leave that for later. We want to know about those he-goats you're going to be offering on the Chagim. Leave that for Parashat Pinchas. Now, what we're going to see is that there are a few of the temple activities mentioned in this parasha, and we want to know why. That's number 1. Difficulty number 2 we are going to have relates to the 4 species. The 4 species that we prepare ourselves, that we purchase, that we sell before Sukkot are mentioned, but for some reason they are mentioned, as we'll see, after everything else. But let's start studying some text. Here's page 682. Page 682, chapter 23, verse 2. Listen, Moshe, Daber al Bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel. Ve'amarta alehem, and tell them that you should know that there are these designated days for gatherings, Mikra'e Kodesh, and in these gatherings, Sheshet Yamim Ta'aseh Melacha. Now, first of all, we mentioned the Shabbat, and on the Yom HaShvi'i, Shabbat Shabbaton. Fine, so keep the Shabbat. That's a fundamental weekly day of rest. There is an insight of the Gaon of Vilna that if you count the Chagim, there are actually 6 days of the Chagim where we are allowed to do some work. We are allowed to prepare food. The 7th day of the Chagim is Yom HaKippurim, where there is no food preparation. And he reads the verse that you could read, verse 3, that there are 6 days which include, 2 days of Pesach, 1 day Shavuot, 1 day Rosh Hashanah, we're talking about Torah law, and the 2 days of Sukkot. For 6 days, Te'aseh Melacha, there are some works that you do, You could go ahead and prepare food. However, by Yom HaShvi'i, when it comes to Yom HaKippurim, Shabbat Shabbaton, Kol Melacha, no work at all, shall be done. Fine, this is an insight of the Gaon, but let's turn to the Chagim here. First one obviously starts with Pesach, because when does the year start? Nisan. So what come Nisan, right? Don't we say to everyone, Shana Tova? No, we don't. But you just said it's the beginning of the year. What? Okay. But we have, on the one hand, we do call it, it is the beginning of the year. It is the first of all the Chagim. And no one ever...
It's the other one is...
The other one is what? Obviously, Rosh Hashanah.
And this one is for us.
Okay, good. Okay, good. We have an insight that this is really for us, a beginning for us. So it's a beginning, but it's not really the beginning of the year. Are we okay with that? We have no choice, you say. Okay, so here we go. The first paragraph relates to Pesach. We have Pesach, we celebrated Pesach, fine. Verse 10, we are told, listen, when you arrived in the land of Israel, and we are told here, Daber bnei Yisrael v'amartelem ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lachem. When you arrive in the land of Israel and you reap your harvest, what do you bring on the second day of Pesach? The Omer. What is done with this Omer? Now the Omer itself, the word Omer is really a measurement. It's a measurement that was used. And we are told that you bring an offering. The offerings volume is an Omer, and therefore we call it the Omer. You bring that offering. In verse 12 we are told that you go ahead and it's waved. When is this brought? Mimacharat Shabbat, right after the first day of Pesach. You bring some offerings on that day. And suddenly, in this section where we did not expect anything that relates to offerings, they are described. So we're going to have to explain why. Verse 15, from that day on, you should count, which we are very familiar with, Usfartem lachem in verse 15, Mimacharat Shabbat, Miyom aviachem et haomer, from the day that you brought that offering, which was a volume of an Omer, you count 7 complete weeks, and then in verse 16 we are told, until after the 7 weeks you count into the 50th day. What happens on the 50th day? Another offering. What kind of offering do you bring on that day? So we are familiar with the 2 loaves that are brought on Shavuot. So that's what we are told in verse 17. You go ahead and you bring this 2 loaves made of fine flour, the rabbi, it is explained that there is a significant difference between the two. The rabbis will tell us, which we'll deal with very soon. And again, sacrifices are mentioned. Not expected. We move on and move to the next page, and we'll have more of the Chagim, which we are familiar with. Eventually, verse 34, we're told about Sukkot. Now, verse 37 it seems to be summing it all up. Verse 37. We went through Pesach, we went through Shavuot, we went through Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, and now we are told, Ele Moadei Hashem asher tikru ota mikra kodesh. These days mentioned are the festivals you proclaim in a holy gathering. Now, remember, don't forget the Shabbat. Mission accomplished. Verse 39, after everything is summed up, what appears in verse 39? However, you should know that on the 15th of the 7th month, which we call Sukkot, what do you bring? Verse 40, you should go ahead and take for yourselves the etrog, the branches of the date palm, the twigs, which we call the adasim, the willows, the aravot, and with it, verse 41, v'chagotem oto chag la'Hashem shivat yamim. You should celebrate with them for a 7-day period. Verse 42, you settle in the Sukkot. It's very interesting that the Torah decides to separate the details of Sukkot from the actual holiday. So these things need to be clarified. So the commentators share with us the following. Let's start with the Omer. What's really happening we counted Omer, right? Last night we counted 27 days, right? So what exactly are we counting? So we are told, listen, on Pesach you're going to bring an offering that's made out of barley. On Shavuot you're going to bring an offering to the temple that's made out of wheat. Barley in general is used as food for animals in general, right? We've eaten some chont and we're okay with it.
Beer.
Wheat is more of a symbol of a high quality. It was in the Talmudic times, it was double the price, wheat, because it's a higher quality. It's for human consumption. And it's telling you that, listen, you Jews, you left Egypt, you're free. You have your freedom. You think freedom on its own has value? Right, to be free. You read about Russia in the early 1990s. Russia was free, the end of communism. Right? Was it a civilized place? Was it a civilized location? Right? I had a friend told me that he's in Russia. They're right after Predastroika and after the fall of communism. So he said, what was the difference? He said that during communism, to buy goods, if he was there, she'll tell you there were long lines. He said after the fall of communism, there were long lines, but people were cutting in the line because there's freedom now. He said that was the difference between before and after. I read somewhere about that there was a major financial crisis in the mid-1990s in Russia, and they needed a financial bailout. So the IMF sent like $2 billion. So where did it go, the $2 billion? Almost all of it went to the pockets of, there's freedom now, you can do what you want, right? Freedom on its own, very, very dangerous. In Judaism we say you're free, you could be like an animal now. We want you, the Torah wants you to become a human being. And therefore we don't keep Pesach on its own. Never end your Jewish journey by Passover. You end your Jewish journey with Passover, you're not a mensch. How do you become a mensch? You learn about the values of Torah, right? The derech eretz of Torah, the spirituality of Torah. Therefore, there must be a connection between the two. You bring an offering, animal food. You want to upgrade it, you have to count. You count because you grow during this period of time. And that's what the Omer is about spiritual growth. Throughout history, we failed a lot. And by the way, that probably explains why the Omer turned into a time really of mourning. And it seems to be that we did not. Even great Torah scholars failed in that area. We talk about what do we mourn during this period of time. The passing of the disciples of Rabbi Akiva. What was their flaw, the rabbis tell us? Not that they did not keep the highest standard in kashrut, right? And not that, that when they were praying it was less than 5 minutes, but rather, shalom nahagu kavod zeh bazeh. They did not treat one another with respect. This is really the core of what Judaism is about. Yes, there are spiritual practices that keep the religion alive, but the message of the religion is, be a decent person, treat people with respect. That is the growth that is expected from us. And therefore it is mentioned, these offerings that are temple-based are mentioned in the section that is talking about the essence of the holidays, because the Torah wants you to understand that this is really what it's all about. Growth. From a behema to a mensch. You know what they say about the young kala who meets who meets the chosin. So the saying is that when they're engaged, the kala thinks that the chosin is a malach, right? She doesn't know him, so she thinks he's an angel, right? The future husband, he's an angel. He's so nice, he's so kind. But then when they get married, she realizes that he's not even a mensch, right? So Judaism doesn't want us to be an angel, but there's an expectation. It's in our tradition, the biggest compliment you could tell a person, that he's a mensch, a decent human being. This is what it's all about. This is what Shavuot is all about. So that gives us a little bit of an insight into why that's mentioned there. Now, you should know, the lulav and the etrog, it's a very festive type of celebration. If you have ever been in Israel on the days leading to Sukkot, and you look at the marketplace where they are selling the lulavim, the etrogim, the hadassim, it's a scene. And many people even have pictures of it hanging in their sukkah. In other words, even if they pick up their lulavim and etrogim here in Toronto, and all it means is you walk into a room and you purchase it and you pay your $75 and move out. But that image of a marketplace, of activity, people negotiating, people looking for the finest, looking with magnifying glasses at their lulavim and etrogim, there's something elevating. It's very festive. The ideal and the proper location for those festivities are actually in the temple, because the Torah makes it very clear that you celebrate with these branches for 7 days in front of God. Let's read the text one more time on page 688. That in verse 40 we are told, "Ulekachtem lachem bayom harishon." You take these species. What do you do with them? Usmachtem, and you're going to go ahead and rejoice. Lifnei Hashem Elokechem, before Hashem. What does it mean before Hashem? In the temple. And according the way the rabbis explain to us this text, the Torah tells us that in the temple itself, in Jerusalem, shaking those species is a Torah law all 7 days. All 7 days. On the other hand, if you are not in the temple area, if you are in Toronto, you fulfill the Torah mitzvah with the 4 species only on day 1. The last 6 days, it's rabbinic. After the destruction of the temple, you had Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that sense that we have to preserve tradition and people have to be mindful of the temple. So therefore he tells everyone that throughout the ages, let's continue this practice of celebrating it for 7 days, even though the last 6 are only rabbinic. So you hear the idea, it's really a temple activity, so we can understand why the Torah separates it. It's not really the core of the holiday. The ideal location for that celebration with those species relates more to the temple. And the Torah separates it from the main mentioning of these mitzvot. There's an opinion, by the way, that when you stand by the Kotel, which is the historical Jerusalem, there it is a Torah law all 7 days. So there are people in Israel that try throughout Sukkot every single day to make it their business to come to sections of the old city that were in existence during the first temple period, meaning an area that is clearly Torah law, and shake the species specifically there. So you see that we still have that link to the temple with the Western, mitzvot, right? In other words, something to be mindful of as we are celebrating, right? 50 years since Shichrur Yerushalayim, so that's something to be mindful of. So this is what we have, right? We have an understanding a little bit of this week's portion. We have a little bit of an understanding what's occurring here. We learned a little bit about the development, right? There's a progress that's occurring. And we learned a little bit about the fact that this is not here to tell us what to do in Jerusalem, but how to celebrate everywhere. And it's giving us the essence, the core of what the holiday is about. Now, there is one other detail that we have to remember. We have to remember here. And that is, the Midrashim tell us that the Chagim must be viewed as a relationship that we have with the God of Israel. The relationship we have with the God of Israel. And it starts off with an engagement, marriage, big fight in the marriage, and then making up. That's how the rabbis explain the relationship we have with the God of Israel. Now, the engagement is obviously Pesach. Why is it an engagement? Chatan and Kala fall in love. They do not know one another at all. And the older you get, right, the more you recognize it, and you look at young couples getting engaged, and it's a leap of faith. It's all faith, right? It's called love, but it's faith, because they have absolutely no idea what it's about. It's the beginning of a journey, but it's love, and there's commitment. Chesed ne'uraych, ahavat klulotayich. That's Passover. Then there's growth during the engagement period. They get to know one another. And then they're under the chuppah. Mazel tov, it's a celebration. Our relationship to the God of Israel is not based on Jewish food, and it's not based on Jewish humor, and it's not our talents in so many areas. It's not the fact that the commissioner of so many sports are Jews. I was looking at the list the other day, right? And I think, who's the commissioner of hockey? Bettman, right? Bettman, Jewish, I think.
Yeah.
And then I remember in Milwaukee when we were there. So we had a kiruv. There was people that were learning with people in town. So one of the colleagues in the kollel, met Bud Selig. And Bud Selig at the time was the commissioner of baseball. And he says to him, would you come learn Torah? And Bud says, yeah, I'll do it. I'll come learn with you Torah, but I'm busy now. But very soon I'm going to be finished with this commission. It took him another, I think, 20 years to move on. Also Jewish. And if I'm not mistaken, some other, in basketball, there's a guy, Stern, I think, that's also, no basketball people. Okay, that's because the team gets swept by Cleveland. But bottom line is, that's not what defines our Jewishness. Right? What defines our Jewishness? What's the marriage to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's obviously the Torah. Shavuos. So that's Mazel Tov the Chasana. Then obviously there's the big fight. What's the big fight? Chatay Egel. What? The sin of the golden calf. The rabbis make it very clear. This is a marriage, and right after the Sheva Brachas, everything goes wrong. Everything goes wrong. But then this is a healthy marriage after all, and there's complete commitment. And sometimes after a real good fight, both parties recognize how much they cannot manage without the other one. And the relationship after this good fight is much, much deeper than the relationship beforehand. Because they sense, you know what? That this is a bond, this is a commitment. And my identity is lacking if I'm not with you. And therefore the love really makes its appearance when they can make up after the fight. And that is Sukkot. Sukkot is the greatest level of happiness. How did we reach Sukkot? Through Yom Kippur. Through Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that season of Tshuva. In other words, we always are taught that it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, then we reach Sukkot. No. Sukkot is the pinnacle. How do you get to Sukkot? Well, you have to have that good summertime fight, which we call the sin of the golden calf. And then afterwards we have Sukkot. This is our journey that we go through every single year with the Almighty. We relive it. Okay? So we have a little bit of an understanding of how these holidays work.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Question.
Yeah.
How do you explain that Sukkot does not have edible food, same as Pesach and Shavuot has? The Arba Minim are not.
Yeah, not really edible. Now, the Shavuot food, you have to remember, is a little bit of a later one.
Yeah.
Meaning the cheesecake made its appearance.
No, I'm talking about the wheat.
Or the wheat, or the korbanot. You mean the edible korbanot. I'm thinking already, cheesecake. Which indicates a significant problem here. But you're talking about, so these two korbanot, the Omer, are here for a very specific reason. The concept of don't let freedom stand alone. Meaning it has to be a meal offering for animal. So it has a very specific message, a very specific one. Sukkot it's really the main focus of Sukkot is the relationship we have with God. But God does not want the people of Israel to walk around thinking we're loved by God. What we focus on Sukkot is humanity, really, which is a fascinating thing that when Jews reach their pinnacle, they think about our mission to humanity. So what do we do on Sukkot? Well, we bring 70 sacrifices for the welfare of humanity. We read Kahelet when we welcome all the nations. The Haftarot on Sukkot talk about nations of the world should come because Jerusalem is the capital of the world. So it's a different focus. So the food had a very specific message when it comes to those two. Okay, but the question is a good one. So we have a little bit of understanding of the holidays themselves. Now, we know very well that as a nation, we are looking forward. And throughout the ages, we've spent 2,000 years talking about a redemption, a future redemption. And there's so much literature on this concept of a messianic era. Talmud discusses it. Now, there is a dispute in the Talmud. When exactly is it going to occur? And we're not talking about a date, a specific date, as it comes to a year, because those didn't work. Meaning, throughout the ages, there have been those who have predicted the Messiah coming at a specific year. There have been many, many, many predictions, by the way. And they all have one thing in common. They've been all wrong. So therefore, it's highly recommended in our tradition to avoid those predictions. And if you hear some great Kabbalists saying that a specific year is going to be the year of the redemption, right? Ignore it, right? Focus on growth, focus on unity, focus on doing the homework because that has far more of a purpose than working with dates. However, the Talmud has a question regarding what month will the Messiah come. So there are two rabbis, and you have to remember their names. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. And they live after the destruction or towards the end of the temple period, the second temple. Rabbi Eliezer tells us, Betishrei atidin leigael. The future redemption is going to occur in the month of Tishrei. So you can remember that? Eliezer says it's going to occur in Tishrei. Rabbi Yehoshua says, Benisan, in the month of Nisan, they're going to have the future redemption. Okay? Tishrei or Nisan. Do you really think that these rabbis believe that there's like this 1 month window, and if the Messiah doesn't come, right, if his donkey gets stuck in some mud, right, he won't make it because it's after his window? Hard to believe. Most probably, these two rabbis mean that there is something about the Nisan relationship we have with God. So therefore, Rabbi Yeshua says that it is the Nisan relationship that the people of Israel have with the God of Israel that will be the Messianic era. And then you have the Rabbi Eliezer approach that says, no, it's the Tishrei environment that will bring the future redemption. Right? Possible way of saying it. Now, the redemption throughout the ages has been compared to the spring. The future redemption has been compared to the spring. You have a seed. The seed's in the ground. The seeds in the ground could be in freezing cold temperature. And if you don't remember what that's like, think about yesterday, right? Cold, winter. The seed's in the ground, and it's waiting there patiently. And it has whatever it needs to go ahead and produce a plant, a tree, fruit, flowers, and it's in the ground there. Eventually comes the right time, and it comes to life, and there's beauty. Right? Did you see the cherry blooms? Have you ever had the opportunity of seeing it? It's a gift from the Almighty. God wants us to just enjoy it for the 1 week, if we're lucky, that it's there. Magnificence, right? The seed, it was there. It had the potential within it. It waited patiently. It waited patiently until it comes to life. Well, that's like a redemption. That's a redemption. And the Talmud, for example, tells us, there's a section in the Talmud that talks about the coming of the Messiah. And one of the rabbis gets up and says, you know what? You want to look for signs that the Messiah is coming? So he quotes a verse in Yecheskel, where we are told in Yecheskel that you, Hare Israel, you, the mountains of Israel, when your branches will give fruits, you will know that the redemption is coming. In other words, when you see products of the land of Israel that are high quality, when you see wines of the state of Israel that are far better than the French and the Italians, you know that, you know what, that's a sign that the Messiah is coming. This is a statement that's made in the Talmud some 1800 years ago. That when you walk into Machane Yehuda and you see the rimonim and you see the fruits and you see quality, that's a sign. It's like the spring. There's a comparison between redemption and spring, right? So that's what we are told. Now, I think that really explains what Rabbi Yehoshua is telling us. What's Rabbi Yehoshua telling us? Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that when is the redemption going to occur? In Nisan. What is Nisan? Spring, right? So this is what he's really talking about. It's going to be nature is going to come alive again. And now, sometimes it's not always easy. You know, if you suffer from hay fever, you know very well that sometimes the redemption is not just an easy process, because when things come to life, there are some people that suffer. I philosophically take the idea that the Messianic era is one when there are people with different ideologies. And the goal is to learn from everyone. When one person who is very mystical and one person very logical, one is very heartsick, works with the emotion, one is very intellectual. But when everyone respects one another, each one gives out a little bit of what they're about, and there's a cross-contamination, right? The pollen is a symbol of everything coming together. Now, a person standing there, right? Some people, you're gonna have some difficulty with all the pollen. That's how I deal with hay fever. When this is like only after Benadryl can I come up with such insights. But that's the idea, perhaps. But do we understand Rabbi Yeshua? This is really what we have to focus on. Do we have Rabbi Yeshua's insight? What's Rabbi Yeshua telling us? Future redemption is like the spring. So what does Rabbi Eliezer hold? Come on, so let's figure it out. Rabbi Eliezer says that the future redemption will be like Tishrei. It will be a redemption of spirituality. Well, but what is Tishrei? It's the month of Shuva. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion, that's not how the future redemption is going to occur. It's not going to be the seed waiting there and then come to life. But rather, it's going to be a nation that they are going to be waiting for something to guide them, and they're going to find something that is a false Messiah. They're going to go ahead and believe in something that is not the Messiah to be the Messiah. They're going to find like a new God. They're going to reject the God of Israel. They're going to create an Egel Hazav. They're going to create a golden calf. And then they're going to realize that golden calf is really nothing. And they're going to feel regret. They're going to do tshuva. And they're going to reconnect to God like a Tishrei. So the future redemption, Rabbi Eliezer believes, is only going to occur after the children of Israel are going to fall in love with a false Messiah, a false movement, a false ideology, a false attitude, and then after that regret it and reconnect to God. Two approaches. Comes the great Rav Tzadok Hakon of Lublin. This is a rabbi, lived in the 19th century. He came from a Lithuanian background. He became a Hasidic thinker, an incredible thinker and philosopher. And he notes that in Judaism, when you have disputes, quite often they're both right. They're both right. In other words, what he's telling us is that the redemption of the people of Israel is going to occur. When for some Jews it's going to be a Nisan. Some Jews are going to wait patiently, wait for the redemption, going to stick to the belief that a redemption is going to occur, and then a redemption will happen. Other Jews are going to fall in love with something that's fake, that's empty. It's an empty shell. Then they're going to recognize, you know what? That's not the answer. It's not the answer. And they're going to find the God Almighty, the God of Israel. That's what he knows. Now, what is this false Messiah that perhaps it's being referred to? So I'll quote you a rabbinic thinker of the 20th century. Okay. And he talks about secular Zionism. Secular Zionism. And he talks about his concern that there's this group, there's these people who have no zecher lekdushat Israel be'emet. They remember nothing about the true holiness of the people of Israel. And they take something what he calls le'umiyut mezuyefet. Le'umiyut, nationalism, mezuyefet. That is false, that is fake. And then they go ahead and have this external Tzura Yisraelit. Externally it looks Jewish, it has a Hebrew language, it's a love of the land of Israel. But Hapanim Kulo, their essence is unfortunately Eino Yehudi. It's not really a Jewish core. And the secular Zionist, he writes, that eventually it's going to become a mashchit and a mifletzet. It's going to turn into something destructive and into a mifletzet. You know what a mifletzet is? A monster. And eventually, he says, that if a secular approach and a commitment to the land of Israel has nothing religious in it, it's going to turn eventually into Sinat Israel. It will have a hatred of Israel, and it will have even a hatred of the land of Israel. Does this sound like a Haredi approach to you? Like what? Who would you label? Who would you say wrote such a thing? What? Who didn't write? Many people wrote. So this is actually the works of Rav Kook.
Except, of course, we wouldn't have the land of Israel without these
Okay,
nationalists.
so
And we know
no question.
We know that most of them have a Seder, most of them do something for
Okay.
Shabbat, and most of them
No
fast
question.
on Yom
So
Kippur.
let's explain what Rav Kook is saying. Rav Kook was the greatest of all, so we have to understand what he's saying.
What year did he say this?
What was that?
What year did he say this?
1925. Now, what is Rav Kook really telling us? He wrote this actually in 1908. What Rav Kook is telling us is that a religious Jew has a responsibility of bringing the soul of Judaism to this movement. You cannot stand by and let it stand alone. You can't do that. You have to be a partner. And the religious Jew has the responsibility of joining them. You need a religious Zionism. That's what he's saying. You need someone to give the neshama of Judaism to this movement. Because if you let them stand alone, you know what's going to happen? They're going to turn into writers of Haaretz. That's what he's telling us. Because writers of Haaretz have a hatred towards Israel and a hatred towards the land of Israel. He predicted it. And his prediction was right, but at the same time he inspired many to join. And he inspired today, and if you look at the trends in the land of Israel, right, the trends, in the attitude in the army, in the attitude in the country, they're all in the right direction because of such a vision. A person that knew what could happen if you don't join, and there are many that rolled up their sleeves and joined. This is what Rav Kook, that's the greatness of Rav Kook. And if you think about it, if you want to go ahead and find the moment, if you want to find that moment of when the state of Israel started its proper course, it's 1967 with the capture of Yerushalayim. That really changed the direction. There was an awakening. We talk about a tshuva movement. When did the tshuva movement start? When did people start thinking? When was there an awakening that they first believed in something that what he called a mashchit, something destructive? He called it destructive. But when did it turn around? When did it start the process of tshuva? The capture of Yerushalayim. There's no question about that. And this is what he is telling us is this is the Rabbi Eliezer redemption. It's a Tishrei experience. So we are viewing, if you look at the people of Israel, and if you look what it's occurring in our days, we see a Nisan, right? We see that for many, many Jews, there was never anything abandoned. There was an understanding that it's coming to life in the land of Israel. It's a Nisan experience. The redemption is occurring with a Nisan. But there's also a redemption that's occurring with a tshuva, with an awakening. Right? If you look, and the numbers tell it, and look at the army units, and look at the commitment, and look at footage of Jews going into the Gaza war, a few years ago, dancing with a Sefer Torah, with kippot. It's a change that's occurring, and this is a tshuva, this is a Tishrei movement. And this is how we are supposed to look at the holidays, and this is how we have to look at the experience of the people of Israel. This is what we are told by Rav Tzadok, and it's a fascinating insight by someone who identified trends, passed away in the year 1900, and is telling us that they're both true, they're both going to occur. And you look at the 20th century, 21st century, and you see indeed, there's still homework to do, obviously, but hopefully we could be optimistic that when things are going in the right direction, only good is waiting for us in the future as well. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you, B, for sponsoring Shem Sharav and Aliyah, and a good day indeed. It's an awakening.
Do you want to shut this off? Home. Okay.
Said about Russia.
Yeah. What year?
Alan.
But she knew what I was doing.
I don't want to mess up here.
The traveling was different.
Is that power? Enough?